On this week's episode of Film Critics Weekly, does good boys get blinded by the light? Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, almost afternoon. Welcome to another episode of Film Critics Weekly, presented by the LA Online Film Critics Society. As you can tell, the table is empty this week. I am here to do a special episode that is going to highlight some films coming out this weekend, along with our movie pick of the week, before I jump into some of the changes that are going to be happening to the show in the couple of weeks ahead. So first and foremost, I of course am LAOFCS founder Scott Menzel. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the other Scott M. And then you can also read my work, including my reviews and interviews, at the other Scott M. Of course on Facebook, but also you can actually read them on WeLiveEntertainment.com and on YouTube at The Other Scott M, which is where I've been putting up a lot of my video interviews. So very quick episode this week. I want to talk about two of the bigger releases coming out, but also, of course, give a little bit of love to some of the smaller titles that were part of our movie pick of the week vote. A couple of films coming out that I would like to give a little brief shout out to would be the Amazing Jonathan documentary. This was a film that is now streaming on Hulu. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, and it follows the Amazing Jonathan, who is a comedic magician who found out that he only had 1 year to live. That was a couple years ago, and he manages to still be alive today. It's a mystery. No one knows how he's still alive today, including himself. I was lucky enough to actually sit down and talk to him this week, as well as the director of that film. I believe his name is Ben Berman. And we discussed this fascinating documentary, which you should watch on Hulu this weekend. It is very bizarre. It's about the magician who I mentioned and this documentary filmmaker who gets on board to kind of follow him around during the last year of his life, which, as I spoiled, he is still alive. But weird things begin to happen as he's filming this documentary. Like, there's another documentary crew that comes on board. And then there's another documentary crew that comes on board. And then there's a third one. So essentially, there becomes 3 additional documentary crews along with him, so 4 in total. And this becomes a whole big thing because this guy doesn't even know what his documentary is about. The camera turns on him. He starts talking about his life and his childhood. So it's a very weird and honest movie. One of the things that I really liked about this film is the fact that it looked at a documentary and basically deconstructed it. It took back the layers and kind of showed how biased and how manipulating documentary filmmaking can be. And it pretty much shows you all the ins and outs of documentary filmmaking. And when something does not go as planned, you kind of have to make up an ending or a storyline on the fly, which is very much what happens in this film. Don't want to spoil too much about it, but it's really weird. It's really different. If you're a fan of documentaries, definitely recommend checking it out. A movie that I did not see this week is Angry Birds 2, of course, the sequel to Sony Animation's Angry Birds, which I'm surprised there was ever a sequel, but the first one made a ton of money, so there you go. The sad release of Annapurna's Where'd You Go, Bernadette, which I believe is really suffering due to the ongoing bankruptcy rumors that is going on with Annapurna Pictures. As you guys may or may not know, they've released a lot of award season films, as well as the movie Booksmart earlier in this year. Most of those movies have not made a whole bunch of money, so therefore Annapurna is not doing well, and that's probably why you haven't seen much advertising, too much advertisements or any of the trailers or the marketing for Where'd You Go, Bernadette, because they're suffering due to that. This film, it's kind of a weird little movie. It's about an artist who basically she's an architect. She likes to design really unique buildings, and one of her buildings ends up being a flop, and she decides to kind of become a recluse and live in this well-to-do white-collar neighborhood with her husband and her daughter. And basically, it's a film about depression, but also about finding your creativity once again. Cate Blanchett's in it. Wonderful performance, as always, from her. I would honestly say it's another award-worthy performance from her. Really, really would recommend this movie. It's sad that it's not going to get much love this weekend, but if you have an opportunity, you should check it out. Also, it's directed by Richard Linklater. Very much a different type of film for Richard Linklater, something that you have not seen him do before, which is another reason why I liked it. Moving into the bigger releases this week, we have 47 Meters Down, Uncaged. Not going to really talk much about this because I'm going to be doing the show with Dimitri Panos, who you may know from Meet the Movie Press, also a member of this organization. We're going to be doing anatomy of the movie with that film, so I'm going to be breaking it down with him there in just a few minutes after this show ends, so tune into that episode. But the big release that, a lot of people have been talking about, a lot of people have been asking about, is, of course, this movie, Good Boys, which is a film that I saw back at South by Southwest. Now, this movie stars Jacob Tremblay, Brady Noon, and Keith L. Williams. It basically follows three little kids. They're I shouldn't say they're little kids. They're not really little kids. They're middle schoolers, and they're essentially interested in kissing girls, and they're trying to learn how they can do that. So what basically happens is they use their father's drone, and they spy on the neighbor next door who has her boyfriend over. Well, long story short, the drone gets damaged, and these kids basically embark to the mall to try to get another drone before their dad comes home. If this sounds kind of familiar, it's because it is. It borrows from a lot of other films, including Ferris Bueller's Day Off. There's actually a scene that's pretty much ripped directly out of that movie that's in this film. I saw this movie at South by Southwest, as I said earlier. I did not like this film whatsoever. I understand what the writers and what the director was going for with this film. Of course, it's produced by Evan Goldberg and Seth Rogen. So if you're familiar with their work, like movies like Sausage Party or Superbad, you kind of know what you're going to get with this movie. And if you're a fan of that type of material, I would say it's slightly worse than that, but you'll still probably find something to be enjoyed about it. Me, not so much. I found it incredibly infantile. I feel like it's another step down in terms of comedy. I know, Seth Rogen loves pushing the envelope when it comes to like the ages, and him and James Franco did a big thing with that for a while there, where they were pushing like how young is too young and stuff like that. And here we have this really innocent young cast that is basically forced to play with like dildos and swing on sex swings. I get why that's amusing. To me, it doesn't work when translated into a 90-minute film. I just feel like it's Superbad just being retold with younger kids, and that they want to try to say oh my God, look what we're doing now. I said this in my review, and I really wanted to point this out because Trey Parker and Matt Stone, who are the guys behind South Park, Book of Mormon, Team America, World Police, these guys have been making this type of TV series for a very long time. And now we're seeing this come into a live action film. And I feel like none of it is nearly as clever as a South Park episode, which in a lot of ways it is a live action episode of South Park, because it's the same type of hijinks, it's the same inappropriate behavior, it's foul mouth, all that stuff. To me, it was very predictable. It became tedious. It's like the same joke just being repeated over and over again. Was not a fan of this film. If I had to give it a grade, I would probably give it somewhere between a D and a D minus. Yes, I did dislike this movie that much. Just not a fan. But I am so glad to hear that our movie pick of the week, we were able to come together and celebrate the man and the music of Bruce Springsteen. And I have to say that Blinded by the Light is a delightful little film. So happy to announce that it is the movie pick of the week this week. It is directed by, and I apologize, I'm going to try not to butcher her name because she's one of the sweetest women working in the industry today, Gurwinder Chadha. She is the director of this film. She also did Bend It Like Beckham, as well as Bride and Prejudice, which is basically a Bollywood musical take on Pride and Prejudice. Really, really great films. Very under the radar director, but I really like her films. She knows how to tell a very intimate story about a very small community and a small group of people, and elevate their stories to have universal appeal. And one of the things that I really loved about Blinded by the Light is that this movie, which takes place in 1987 in a small town called Luton, basically follows this kid who's lost. He wants to be a writer. However, his dad basically moved to Luton when they were little, and he wants him to have big dreams of doing work like being a doctor or a lawyer. At one point in the film, he basically says to him, "Follow the Jews, they're very successful." Kind of things like that, which I found very funny, but also just kind of putting his values of what a parent wants from their kid. They want their kid to have a better life. And that's something that I think the message of this film is very interesting, because as a lot of us know, and especially nowadays, is that what our parents often want for us in terms of careers are not exactly what we as growing adults want. My dad wanted me to be into sports, and I was never into sports. I was always into doing something creative, whether it was drawing or writing. I live for the movies, and that's obviously why I'm doing this now, because I just love movies. And in this film, it's very similar. The dad has this certain expectation of what he wants his son to do with his life, and yet the son, his dream is to become a writer. He loves that. And through the music of Bruce Springsteen and how that kind of comes into play is that he's down on his luck. A friend in school basically hands him 2 Bruce Springsteen albums and basically tells him, listen to this music, it's going to change your life. And he listens to the music, and the lyrics of Bruce Springsteen flash on the screen, and you start seeing how those lyrics, which are basically written about Asbury Park, New Jersey, and about the blue-collar workers in United States, somehow relate to this Pakistani kid who's in Luton, who's facing racism and trying to discover what he wants to do and how to tell his father, I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be a writer, and that's what my passion is. So I think this movie has the power to connect with pretty much anyone who gives it a chance or an opportunity to see it. I think the story itself is very, very universal. I don't understand how people can't appreciate Bruce Springsteen. I understand that not everyone has to be a fan of Bruce Springsteen. I, of course, grew up in New Jersey, so we know Bruce Springsteen. We know the Bon Jovi. Those are the two main iconic music players from New Jersey, so I love them both, but I understand how people may not like either band. But in this case, it gives you appreciation for Bruce Springsteen, not only as a musician and his voice, but also the words and how powerful those lyrics are and how they are able to connect with so many people. So I cannot recommend this film enough. It is going to be a sad weekend because it's not even slated to open in the top 10, even though it's getting a big push by Warner Brothers. They've been trying really hard. I've noticed it on social media this week. But I would really check this movie out if you can. I would give it a A- in terms of a grade. Just a great feel-good film that isn't afraid to tackle some really serious subject matter. You know, not as much as it probably should, but it never gets away from that feel-good feeling, which I think is something that we need today. So check that movie out when you can. Now moving into the future of this show, it's not going away, anyone. So don't worry about that. I just kind of wanted to touch base about some of the big things that are going to be happening in the weeks ahead. So as those who watch this show may or may not know, in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, something starts, which is called festival season. And festival season starts with Venice, and then it goes to Telluride, and then it goes to Toronto. And if you are a fan of the LAOFCS Weekly, which is what this show is now, we used to do a whole bunch of coverage about those festivals, and we're going to still do that. So that's where all the changes kind of are coming into play. So next week, you're going to expect a normal show where we're going to have Elizabeth Stan, Jana Nagase, and Angelique Jackson, and probably Ashley will be back to talk about Brittany Runs a Marathon, Angel Has Fallen, and Ready or Not. And it's going to be a regular format show, kind of like you've been used to for the last couple of weeks. On August 30th, we're going to do a pre-tape. So the episode will air live at the normal slot at 11 o'clock, but we're going to do a pre-tape, and that's going to be our festival movie preview, where it's going to be me and a couple other people who are going to be going to these festivals. We're going to talk about what movies we're excited about, which ones we think are going to have potential award season push. So we're going to talk about that, and that's going to be the episode on August 30th, 2019. Then on September 6th, just to make things a little crazy for you, we're going to have a regular live show here in studio. It's going to be the same formula that you're used to. Again, don't have a panel yet, but it's going to be all the releases coming out that week. I think that's the week that It Chapter 2 is coming out, so that'll be a review for there. I'm sure that's going to be one of the films talked about. And then September 13th, what I'm going to do is, since I'm going to be at these two film festivals, whether it's going to be Telluride or Toronto, and then of course we'll talk a little bit about stuff that happened at Venice, we're going to do sort of a recap video that's going to air that I'm going to film while I'm at the festivals. I'm going to send it into the studio here, and they're going to air it. And basically, I'm going to try to get Ashley, me, maybe Dimitri, and a few others from the LAOFCS who are going to kind of do like some like mini reviews and kind of splice them in together to actually do like a little show or a review segment that's going to be very focused on films that we saw at the festival. So that is going to be the week of September 13th. And then the 20th of September and moving forward, this is where the fun begins, because that's, now that we're out of those three main festivals, we're going to start talking about award season. So a lot of the shows are going to be dedicated towards award season, but also we want to do a special tribute pretty much from September into December, episodes looking back at the films of a certain year, because we are celebrating the end of a decade in cinema. So what we're going to do is we're going to take down, each year, and we're going to do like an episode dedicated to 2010, basically. And we're going to have a panel here, and we're going to highlight some of our favorite films that came out that year. And we're going to do that pretty much leading up until 2020, which of course, when all is said and done at the end of 2019, we'll have our best of show, which is going to talk about, of course, the best movies we've seen in 2019, and then leading into the year 2020. So just wanted to give you a quick little rundown of what you can expect. I know this show is a lot of changes. It's a lot different from most other shows here on the Popcorn Talk Network because, we're a critics organization and there's a lot of members and we have a lot to discuss and we have a lot of focuses. So we want to, celebrate films, whether they're whether they're the new releases or whether they're award season or best movies of the decade. So we're going to be doing that in the weeks ahead. So I just wanted to give you a quick rundown, and I hope you enjoyed this very short but brief episode of Film Critics Weekly. I was going to say LAOFCS Weekly. I, of course, am Scott Menzel. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram as my voice is going out at the other Scott M, and you can find me at WeLiveEntertainment.com. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Please share, comment, like, and subscribe. Have a great one.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network. The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Popcorn Talk Network or its owners or principals.